On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we look at why the Wild should take notes as to how the Dallas Stars have built their roster as the Wild navigate through the next couple of seasons.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we dive into how the Dallas Stars built their roster, and I'll give you a hint. It may surprise you just how heavily they have relied on good drafting. So we'll take a look at where they have hit in key areas, trades, signings, and draft picks as we launch into a series trying to figure out who the Wild should try to emulate once the Parisian Suter cap hits are gone and they have a little more roster flexibility than they currently have. And the old saying always has been, if you can't beat them, try to make your team like them. And the Minnesota Wild have had a little bit of an issue beating the Dallas Stars here over the last few seasons. And so this got my brain going, is to, if the Wild are going to try to emulate somebody as they build their roster, would you rather go the route of trying to acquire a bunch of players via trade and filling out your roster that way? And I'm going to be honest here. I thought that was more of how the Dallas Stars did their thing than they actually did. They have relied a ton on drafting and having players in later rounds become huge hits. And so if the Wild are looking for a team to emulate, and if you want to try to go a route in which you allow Judd Brackett to really just find these diamonds in the rough, Dallas Stars are not a bad option to take a peek at. And so let's just go through some of these draft picks that the Stars have made that are on the current roster. And it starts with arguably their franchise focal point, their captain, Jamie Benn. Jamie Benn was a 5th round pick in 2007. Has been with the franchise ever since, a cornerstone for that Dallas Stars team. But he is a perfect example of finding value later in the draft. And for Jamie Benn, you look at what he has done throughout the course of his career. Finally got to the NHL level at 2009, 2010. So a couple years after he was drafted. And was a 20-goal-a-year cornerstone for a long time, has been a 30 and a 40-goal scorer throughout his career. 379 goals in 1,100 games, 899 career points in 1,100 games, and he has 23 playoff goals in 83 career playoff games. So a very solid performer, had arguably a career year last year. 78 points at the young age of 33. And so, Ben is, I think, the leading edge of why it is key to find some of these late round draft picks that can turn into stars in similar ways that Kirill Kaprizov did for the Minnesota Wild. We think of, a team has to be filled with all of these upper echelon players. And as we'll talk about, because we're going to do this for Colorado, we'll do this for Vancouver, because you have all these teams that are getting close to the postseason that have gotten here, it feels like, in some different ways. And so Jamie Benn, obviously being with the Stars for a long time as a 5th-round pick, but that's just the tip of the iceberg for this Dallas Stars team. 2 of their younger players, 2 of their franchise focal points now, Jason Robertson and Roope Hintz, both 2nd-round picks. Roope Hintz was drafted in the 2nd round in 2015. Jason Robertson was drafted in the 2nd round in 2017. Both players have become tremendous talents for that Dallas Stars team. Not 1st-round picks. You look at on the defensive side, Miro Heiskanen, 3rd overall pick for the Dallas Stars in 2017. And I went back and looked, and it's funny because the Dallas Stars actually had the 8th best odds to get the 1st-round pick. Colorado had the number 1. Colorado was real bad in that 2016-2017 season. Dallas was 34, 37, and 11. Colorado was 22, 56, and 4. 22 and 60. But Dallas ended up moving up in the draft to the 3rd overall pick. They take Miro Heiskanen and slot him in as the backbone of their defense. And so Heiskanen, a 1st-round pick, a 3rd overall pick, kind of brings that full circle in getting these guys, these franchise cornerstone players at the top of the draft. You have to have those guys. You have to have some late round hits as well. And you sprinkle in some of the other draft picks that have started to make an impact with this Stars team. Radek Faksa, a 1st-round pick, 13th overall in 2012, has been a fixture player for the Stars throughout the course of his career. Has been a double-digit goal guy, but now is asked to be more of a bottom 6 player for this Dallas team. We're seeing Wyatt Johnston, who was drafted in 2021, 23rd overall pick, start to make an impact. Ty Dellandrea, 2028, 13th overall 1st-round pick, starting to make a role. How about Logan Stankoven, 2nd-round pick in 2021. So those guys were drafted just 3 years ago, and that trio has started to really take off. Johnston especially. Stankoven has started to really pick it up as well. And so you look at, of the 13 forwards that the Dallas Stars are carrying on their roster right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them were drafted by the Stars. And on defense, Miro Heiskanen, as we mentioned, 3rd overall pick in 2017. Esa Lundell, 3rd-round pick in 2012. Thomas Harley, who has 15 goals this season. 2019, 18th overall in the 1st round. So of those 7 defensemen, 3 of them were drafted by the Dallas Stars. And then Jake Ottinger in 2017, 26th overall pick. And whether you think that Jake Ottinger is, a franchise goalie or not, he obviously has been someone that's been able to win a ton of games with what the Dallas Stars have built around him. He's a very talented goalie. And he also was drafted by the Dallas Stars. And so of the 22 players on the roster right now, 11 of them have been built up through the system, drafted and developed and put into positions to succeed. Now, the order at which these players are currently operating, with Roope Hintz and Jason Robertson occupying your top line and being players that obviously have outperformed kind of what you expect from where they were drafted. Jamie Benn being a third line guy. You've got Ty Dellandrea in there. You've got Logan Stankoven playing a third line role. Wyatt Johnston playing a third line role. Having the appropriate depth with other ways to add players to the mix has really helped this Stars team build just this incredibly deep roster, especially at the forward position. So with the draft as your backbone, how do you then supplement that? Well, you go out and you make some big signings. And so we'll look at how the Dallas Stars have added players to the mix while keeping their main focus on the draft. We'll talk about that as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home the win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube or give us a follow on your favorite audio platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the day. Continuing our chat regarding how the Dallas Stars built themselves to where they currently sit as one of the top teams in the Central Division and in the Western Conference as well. We talked about the backbone, the draft, being able to draft players, Jamie Benn, Roope Hintz, Jason Robertson, obviously huge focal points of what the Stars are looking to do. Miro Heiskanen, on the defensive side, a huge focal point for them as well. And you got to mix in some solid signings, some free agent signings to supplement what you get through the draft. And the Stars have done that. You look at their big signings that have paid major impact here for Dallas. The biggest probably is Joe Pavelski. Pavelski spent the first large chunk of his career with the San Jose Sharks. He came to Dallas with a 3-year contract that he signed in 2019. 3 years, $21 million contract, and has stayed with the Stars ever since. He signed a 1-year extension in 2022-2023 for $6 million with a $5.5 million cap hit. And then for this season, he signed another 1-year extension for $5.5 million, with the cap hit being 3.5. So Pavelski signed his initial deal and then has just kind of played it by ear because he is 39 years old. So he's just kind of played it by ear. But it's easy for him to do that considering that he has still been a very productive player for the Dallas Stars. He had 77 points last year, 28 goals, 49 assists. This year, he's got 25 goals, 35 assists in 73 games. And so the value is still there. The production is still there. And so the Dallas Stars have kept him around to help supplement what they have done through the draft. Other big signings that they have made include Mason Marchment, who spent 2020, 2021, and 2021, 2022 with the Florida Panthers after, I believe, being traded from Toronto. He signs a deal with the Dallas Stars, a 4-year deal for $18 million to come to Dallas and to help supplement what they've done in the draft. Last year, he had 12 goals, 19 assists in 68 games. This year, he's got 20 goals, 31 assists in 72 games. So you add that in to a group that already has Jason Robertson, Roope Hintz, Joe Pavelski, Jamie Benn, Mason Marchment. You add that into the mix, and that has led to just a very deep roster. And the other players that the Stars signed that panned out, how about Matt Duchene, who was bought out by the Nashville Predators? He comes to Dallas and is having an unbelievably good season for them. He's got 24 goals, 38 assists in 71 games. 2 years ago, he scored 43 goals for the Predators. So the Stars willing to, but here's the other part of that. The Stars were okay with and willing to sign Matt Duchene, knowing that he was not going to have to do what was being asked of him in Nashville. Matt Duchene is playing second line minutes for the Dallas Stars. There's not that pressure to be on that top line like there was for him in Nashville. So he's playing in what is probably way more of a natural spot for him with very productive players on that second line, in addition to, what that top line's doing too. We looked at it with Daily Faceoff. You've got a second line that, as of right now, is featuring Mason Marchment, Matt Duchene, and Ty Dellandrea, and has at points featured Tyler Seguin, who we're going to talk about in a little bit, because he was acquired via other means. And so you've got Matt Duchene, who's able to just do his thing as a second line guy, because you have Robertson, Hintz, and Pavelski on the top line, and they are so good together that you don't need to move them around and try to force them up in the lineup unless absolutely necessary. And so the Stars have taken really solid draft selections, have signed players to add to that mix, but then they have also made, and let's not forget about another buyout player that was signed by this Dallas Stars team, Ryan Suter, who was signed to a 4-year deal after he was bought out by the Minnesota Wild, signed for $14.6 million. Now, whether or not he is what he was at one point with the Minnesota Wild, again, he's not being asked to be more than what he is at this point. He is a third pairing defenseman with the Dallas Stars because of the depth that they have. But that was the player that they were willing to sign and add to the mix because they had already drafted and kind of got that backbone figured out with solid drafts. They also brought into their mix Yanni Hakanpää, who signed a 3-year deal, $4.5 million in total on July 29th, 2021. So you add him into the mix as well. So you, like, if this is the route that we want the Minnesota Wild to go, solid draft picks, and Judd Brackett has done this to this point. So if you want to talk about how you keep up and what you do to contend with the likes of the Dallas Stars, for instance, the draft piece, it appears as though Judd Brackett has done a great job in those instances. And even before Judd Brackett got here, Matt Boldy was a first-round selection. Marco Rossi was a first-round selection. So you have to nail those first-round picks. You've got to get some players to develop from later in the draft. Kirill Kaprizov, obviously, as a 5th-round pick, is a pretty darn good job of developing later in the draft. But then the other piece of it, too, is that once you get all of this constructed through the draft, through free agent signings to add to the mix, there's the trade piece as well. And the Stars have used trades to do a couple of different things to help fill out their roster. And so we'll take a look at some of the trades, and we'll finish by looking at how a lot of these contracts have been constructed as we finish today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Say hello to Busted Brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the NCAA tournament. We've got the Sweet 16 coming up this weekend. And whether you're betting on a big upset or a number 1 seed to continue to roll through the tournament, it is time to go dancing on America's number 1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. If you're getting things started here for a full weekend of tournament action, my suggestion would be to pick a game this week. Could be the Minnesota Wild playing against the San Jose Sharks tomorrow night, and see if you can get a hit on that with your $5 bet. So then you have the full complement of bonus bets to throw at the NCAA tournament. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon, FanDuel.com/lockedon. Final segment of today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to check out our Discord server as well. Link to join will be in the description of this video. So you will have an opportunity to join in on our conversations, both during games, throughout the week, on our Locked on Wild Discord server. So the other piece of this puzzle, we talked about strong drafts and having players that, pop in later rounds of the draft. Free agent signings, bringing in players to supplement what you have put together. The trade piece is a big one as well, because on this roster currently, the Dallas Stars have one notable trade piece amongst the rest of the crew. And actually, you could say they've got two, although one of them is currently on long-term injured reserve, which has freed up a little space for the Stars to otherwise operate. Tyler Seguin, who was traded from the Boston Bruins in 2013 to the Dallas Stars in a package that sent Matt Frazier, Louis Eriksson, Joe Morrow, and Riley Smith to the Bruins in exchange for Rich Peverly, Tyler Seguin, and the signing rights to Ryan Button. Of that group, obviously Seguin was the centerpiece. And if you look at what he has done since, Seguin has been anywhere between 25 to 40, 25, 30 goal per year player, anywhere between 70 and 80 points when he is fully on and is fully healthy. And this year he's got 22 goals, 27 assists in 61 games. But again, you're not asking him to be a top line guy because of all the depth that you have accumulated. You can slot him in as a second or a third line guy to help you mismatch against other teams as you go. Evgeny Dadonov, another example, last year was traded to the Dallas Stars in exchange for Denis Gurianov. Now, with Dadonov on long-term injured reserve, that has given the Stars a little bit of room to maneuver the salary cap space. He's only counting against the cap at $2.5 million. So you've got those two trades. Obviously, the Stars went out and sought a backup goalie and traded for Scott Wedgwood. But then you have this mostly complete roster, and it allows you to go out and try to add pieces at the trade deadline. Chris Tanev, the most notable piece that the Dallas Stars acquired at this year's deadline, was a trade piece. And so you look at it, you look at what you have locked in for your team. You've got Miro Heiskanen, you've got Thomas Harley. That's your top D pairing. You've got Esa Lundell on your second line. And you had at the time of the trade, Yanni Hakanpää in the mix as well. Feel like you need something on defense? Go out and get it. And same thing for, your bottom six. We didn't even talk about Sam Steele, who was a free agent signing for the Dallas Stars, is playing mostly a fourth line role for Dallas this season. And if you look statistically at what Steele has been able to do, he's got 8 goals, 14 assists on the season as a fourth line guy. And so the Dallas Stars have built this roster in which they don't have anybody that is super out of place or being asked to do more than they're capable of. And if you look at the contract piece too, they have no move clauses and modified no trade clauses in their midst as well. But let's think about what these guys are that are getting these no trade, no move clauses. Jamie Benn has a no move clause on his contract. He's coming towards the end of his current deal. He's got 2 years left on it. He's got a no move clause, still a very productive player. Tyler Seguin has a no move clause. His deal is $9.85 million until the end of the 2026-2027 season. But he's still a very productive player. And Ben is, second, third line guy. Seguin is a second, third line guy. Mason Marchment has a modified no trade clause, 10-team no trade list. He's a second line guy. Joe Pavelski has the 35-plus contract, which affords him a no-move clause, but he is playing on the top line. Radek Faksa has a 5-team no-trade list. That's it amongst the forwards. And on defense, Esa Lundell has a no-move clause, but he is one of your top 4 defensemen. Ryan Suter has a 35-plus no-move clause. Chris Tanev has one for the rest of the season, but that was a traded player. That's it. That's all you got. And so you have afforded yourself the ability to still have flexibility to do things. And the no-move clauses for the most part are guys that are productive and guys that, play an important enough role on the team or a key enough role on the team that they're not players that you would be looking to move anyway. And so if we start to turn our attention to what are other teams doing to build these rosters that are playoff caliber, the Dallas Stars, I think, are a model you would want to emulate. Strong in the draft. They have had the draft as their backbone. They've made some signings to supplement what they have built through the draft, and a couple of trades here or there. I think they have put their team together. Now, has it led to them winning a Stanley Cup? No. But over these last couple of seasons, they have been one of the better teams in the Western Conference. They obviously have a coach in Pete DeBoer who has gotten a lot out of that lineup on a nightly basis. And so that is a model I think that is worth emulating. And look, they're going to have a lot of pieces that they will need to potentially replace in the lineup. Matt Duchene is a free agent at the end of the season. Craig Smith, who's playing a bottom six role, is a free agent. On the defensive side, you've got Yanni Hakanpää, Chris Tanev, both coming off the books. So there will be some pieces that they will need to replace. But again, this is a huge piece of this puzzle. They have their top six pretty much exclusively locked in. They may have a need if Joe Pavelski decides that he's going to hang it up at the end of this season. You obviously have a big hole that needs to be filled there, but you have the depth to be able to fill it. You have guys that would be capable of stepping in to a bigger role to fill that type of spot in the lineup. So if we're looking at blueprints, I like what the Dallas Stars have put together. And so when the Wilds get to the point that they're starting to, and we've already seen, at least via the draft, we've seen that, you know, some of these prospects are getting closer and closer to being able to have an impact here. But and this is where all the frustration comes in on the Minnesota Wild side of things. There just is so much rigidity to this current roster that until that ice is broken up and you can allow the river to flow more freely, that's going to be a hurdle here. There is a lot of good young talent in this Minnesota Wild organization. It's just that the roster has been so gummed up that it is going to take some real maneuvering to free up some of the flexibility pieces. So I hope you enjoyed just this look at how some of the other teams in the Central are doing it. We're going to do more of these as the season finishes up and as we get into the off season, because I think there is a common thread amongst how all of these successful teams have done this in terms of building an optimal roster. But, you know, I that kind of stuff fascinates me. So hopefully you enjoyed this dive into the Dallas Stars. We'll keep an eye on the mathematical possibilities for being eliminated from the postseason, because Vegas has played the last two nights, and those games have both turned into 3-point games against teams that are also in front of the Minnesota Wild. And then the Wild play Vegas on Saturday. So we'll keep an eye on the ever dwindling postseason possibilities for the Minnesota Wild, but I am really starting to turn my attention to, like, how do we get through what is currently going on and get to the same level that some of these other teams are at. So we'll do more of these. And as always, we'll keep you up to date with all things Minnesota Wild here on Locked on Wild. So make sure to hit like on this video if you're watching on YouTube. If you are listening via your favorite audio platform, whether it be Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure to give us a 5-star review. We do appreciate it. And we'll continue to keep you up to date on all things Minnesota Wild here throughout the rest of the season and well into the offseason as well. We've got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.